All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to modify. In fact, we'll do a couple different things in here. All right. But the first thing that we want to do is we want to get this set up so that it's able to actually use the database. If you remember, we did this before, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. What we're going to do is, since we're going to have so many routes that need the database, we're going to make sure we're creating the connection to the database every time we need it. Does that make sense? All right. So we're going to come in here, we're going to say function, and I'm just going to call it get connection, because that's what we're attempting to do, is to get a database connection. All right. We're going to put in most of the stuff we did last time. So I'm going to put in here const connection equal MySQL dot create connection. And we're going to put in the host, not the hots, the host, which is localhost. We're going to put in the user, oops, and we're just using root. And we're going to put in the database, which is books. Now, if you'd all stop for just a second, no matter what you're doing, just stop. Just so you know, don't type this. But what I typed in yesterday was this. I put in password, oops, put it on a new line. But I put in password and nothing. That's actually redundant. There is no password. So most of the time what people end up doing is they just leave it off.
That's supposed to be local hosted, not local hosts, right?
That's correct. Or not hosey either. There you go. All right, and then one more line, and that is return connection. So that's the whole thing. That will help us set up our database every time. Now, just so you know, I tabbed this stuff over. You don't have to. It would have been totally fine just like this, and like this, and like that. It doesn't matter. I sometimes tab stuff over because I like the way it looks better. You know, sometimes when I do these, I'll go and line up all this stuff like little soldiers, but you don't have to do any of that. All right, so in just a moment, we're going to come in and we've got our authors right here. And we're going to leave that exactly the way that it is, but we are going to come in and we're going to add another route. Now look, before you type anything, just watch for a second if you would. I'm going to grab all of this and I'm going to copy it. Again, I'll give you plenty of time to do this. And I'm going to paste it in. You'll be, wait a minute, you told us we can't have two things that are the same, and that's true. Here I want to show all authors. Here I want to show a single author. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it singular, and I'm going to get rid of everything that's in here. So for now, we're going to add more stuff. In fact, we don't need this anymore either. So we can remove all of this stuff. So right now, we've just got the author's route and the author route. Is everybody with me? Do you understand the difference between each one? All right. And if you say you do, I believe you. That said, I asked you this question before and Christopher answered it. Maybe one of the rest of you can answer it right now. What's the one thing that distinguishes every author from every other author? The ID. So this one, for the single author, we will be also putting in an ID. We could have called it anything we wanted to, but since it is the ID, typically people call it ID. Does that make sense? All right. So let's fix this one first. It's a pretty simple fix. All right. Now, what we end up putting inside of here, we're going to call the query command. And we end up putting inside of the query command what's called a query string. Yesterday I was calling it SQL, if you remember. I'm just going to start calling it what it is. It's a query string. So I'm going to put in here let query string equal select star from authors. Authors. All right. That's just declaring a string that we're calling query string that's going to hold that. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Then what we want to put in here is get connection, that thing we just wrote. So I'm supposing you called it what I called it, and you spelled it the way I spelled it. All right. If you do that, notice if I hit the dot, all right, and I come in there, one of the things that's going to be in there is, well, I don't want query string, I want query, because that's what I'm about to do. So get connection dot query. The first thing you have to pass it in is the query, which we just renamed query string. I don't want to have to put in here select star from authors. So I can put in here just the word query string. All right. And this can return three things: an error, a bunch of rows, and a bunch of fields. All right, we're almost done, believe it or not, with this one, with this route. Now, don't type, stop, look. We could now just type in this. We could type in this, res.json rows. Now, I just want to show you this. I'm going to come right back to it. So I'm going to save this, all right? And I'm going to come back to here. My server should have restarted, and it did. And now if I come back here to where we just were, and I don't want authors, that should still give me get connection.query is not, that ain't good. We'll fix it in a minute. All right. But now when I come in here for this, ideally at least, it's going to give me the 25 authors instead of those 6 authors that we manually put in at the beginning. Let's see if we can debug this. So it says it doesn't like what I've got, because if I got the error, you're going to have it too. All right, so what do I have here? Get connection.query. That is correct. I don't think it's like this. Let me check, okay? First, let's see if I broke anything. No, that's always a good start. All right, and let me come back to here and refresh. It did want that. But notice who's in here now. We've just pulled in the 25 authors from, I'm sorry, 22, because one guy wrote 3 books and one guy wrote 2, or gal or whatever wrote 2 books. All right, so go ahead, please, and put in, not that, put in this. This is your get all authors page right here in blue. Can I leave that in blue? Everybody can read that okay? When you get done, save it if you don't have the server running, restart it, and go to localhost :4444/authors and make sure you're getting all 22 or whatever it was authors. If you've gone through all of it and tried it and it doesn't work, let me know.
I have everything on there. It's just not displaying like your web page.
If I don't know why mine is showing in a nice format and yours seems to be all over the place. All I can think of is, I'm not sure, but on yours, Do you have something over on the right-hand side that says raw and parsed?
No.
Okay. Because I used to get that, and I chose once parsed, and ever since then, it's presented in a nice format. So, is yours work, Gabriel?
Mine works, just not nicely formatted like
Yes,
this.
not a problem. Because we don't want it to show like this. We eventually want to put it into an HTML table or something like that.
I'm still waiting.
Okay.
It's just sitting there spinning. It's just slash out. Slash authors, is it good?
Yeah. Did it work?
No, it pulled up localhost 444 homepage, but then when I type in slash authors, it just sits
Do you
there.
have authors in your?
I'm pretty sure.
Is your route set up like this? You've got slash authors?
Yes, you got slash authors.
Those are single quotes, right?
That actually won't matter.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you're still missing,
Do you have the res.json line in there?
you're still missing, what's in between the rest of JSON.
The res.json is what prints it out.
Yeah, well, that's why it's not right.
Oh,
So
you're
it's
in
not-
J2.
Thank you. There we go.
This MySQL, that's fine. Should you
And then
type
it's-
this MySQL all lowercase? Or is it still a line or something?
So yours is working, Christopher, right?
Yes.
Yours is working, Gabriel?
Yeah, mine's working.
Okay.
19.4, so that's still line 19. And try MySQL all lowercase.
Yes, it has to be lowercase.
Yep. Usually when it gives you an error, it'll show you like the line, like
Okay.
position where it's at. There you
There
go.
we go. Thank you.
All right. Now, the good news is we're going to do almost the exact same thing in our get a single author. We're going to make changes to it, but to try to make it as simple as possible, we're going to end up copying. Before we do, not that there's anything wrong with this, but technically there's something wrong with this. If you remember, we have always been doing this. If error, throw error. Really, we should do that just in case, because by throwing the error like that, that'll make the program stop. It won't go on if for some reason we try doing this and the database was not available. All right. Now, what we're going to get to in a little bit, not right now, but in a little bit, is there's actually better ways to handle it than just saying throw error. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. But for now, I'm going to grab my lines 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, and 41. The guts, in other words. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to paste that right in here. I'm going to have to make some changes, but that's what I'm doing so far. So right now, other than the fact that this has ID there, these two look identical. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So I'm going to just concentrate. I'm getting rid of that one. I'm just going to show this one. Now, what I want to do is I need now to worry about the ID, correct?
Yes.
So I want to say where ID is equal to, and for now, we put in a question mark. It's a placeholder so that we're able to run this and we're able to put in any author number we want, any ID number. We're still not done, but we're almost there. Literally, we have to make one more change and then we're done. All right. So that change that we want to put in, I'm trying to follow Mike because I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, so let that equal that, yeah. All right, there, yeah, let's not choose the other rows. Okay. So what we're missing here is that ID field, right? Okay, that's this field here. So we have to include that in here. So I'm going to put ID there and then a comma. All right. Still going to be a problem. Okay, right now, it's still not sure what that ID means, what this means right here. Okay? It's expecting that to be a number. Does that make sense to everybody? Because that's what the ID is. And that's like, fine. All right. It doesn't know exactly where to grab that number from. See what I'm saying? Just because you put in there, we're going to put this in a minute. We're going to put in localhost : 4444/authors/3 or whatever number you want. But it still isn't going to know that. So we're going to add one more variable in here. We'll make it a const. It really and truly doesn't matter. But we'll call this user ID. And we're going to set that equal to request.params.id. And what that is saying there is, we're going to change this to user ID as well. All right. So let's just break this down. This says whatever the request was. So that's what we're keying in. Does that make sense to everybody? We want to be able to grab from there one of the parameters, which is called params. We're calling it ID because that's what it was here. That's the way we referred to it. So we're calling it user ID. Then we're saying let query string equal select star from authors, where it's going to replace whatever is in that user ID field. It'll replace that, the question mark, with that. Does that make sense? Then we're calling our get connection.query again, but we have to pass it in that user ID. Now, unless I made a mistake, which is with me is always possible, you know that, but it restarted the server. I'm not getting an error. That's always a good sign. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to come in and I'm going to put in /4. You can put in any number you want and hit enter. Now it says cannot get, so there is something wrong. I'll go back and look at my notes. It's okay. We're going to get this to work. All right. So for some reason it doesn't like this. Oh, you know what? It's author, not authors. All right. So what doesn't it like? Because we are figuring this out. /author/4. That's the way it should be. app.get /author/ID request response fat arrow. All right. Let query string equal select star from authors, where ID equal question mark. That is correct. Const user ID equals request.params.id. That is correct. Get connection.query, query string, okay. User ID, okay. Errors, rows, fields, okay. If there's an error, we're just throwing it. We're going to change that in just a moment. Res.json rows. Why isn't that working? Because it worked this morning. Okay.
I have I have an error I'm seeing under the request.params.id. I don't see it on yours, but I can see it on mine. Property params may not exist.
This?
on type. Yeah. It's only when I move my mouse over the word params, it says it may not exist on request.id.
Well, double check all my notes here, because I don't see anything that I believe I have missed.
Did you?
Like just email says like granted.
Yeah, I see the params, the little line right there. Okay. What was that?
Instead of the E, put in P-A-R.
Yeah. Oh, it's good.
Okay.
Alright, never mind, that was a typo.
Okay. Wondering if somehow my whole connection got screwed up here. So.
Oh, I actually did an error on the bash.
Okay, we will look at it in a minute.
It said that you're at, right?
I'm wondering if the internet went down. Because it won't even let me get to the home page. Yeah, but just restarting it probably isn't going to do diddly. Because that's not what the problem is. The problem is if there's,
Well, then, I think the error's gotta be within whatever we just typed into.
yeah, but I don't, like with mine at least, I don't think there's an error. Because now it's going to taking the thing that worked fine before, and it's not showing it.
That's because your connection to the thing crashed. I think.
So let me close this.
Yeah.
You're right. So let's see what's up here. Unknown column ID in where clause.
Well, that's when you get to the home page, but not the.
Should it be author ID?
Oh. Yeah, maybe. Because I was working with two different databases. So let's try that. Let's try here. Author underscore ID. You very well could be right. So let's see. So now it's up and running again. Let's go back to here.
Seems to work.
There's that. There's that.
There we go.
And it's
Author.
author, not authors. There you go. Thank you. See, this is the button I meant. See this?
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yeah, I don't know why I would have it. Maybe I do. Let's see. It's because, hold on, you're going to get it in just a minute. I'm not sure which of these I used, and it probably won't matter, but if you want to do this, go here. So go to the Chrome store, and you don't even have to do that. Just Google JSON formatter. All right, just Google JSON formatter. Must be the one I've got because it asks me if I want to remove it. See that? You won't have that because if you don't have it on, you can't remove it. But after you go and put in JSON formatter, so if I just come in here and type in JSON formatter, Chrome you might have to add, I don't know. But that's the one you want. So then click right there on that. And when you do, you should have something that asks if you want to install it into Chrome, and just say yes. Did you get that? All right. Now, when you look on the screen, look, I can have it just like yours. I can put it in raw format, or I can put it in parsed format. All right. I forgot. Oh, I'm glad somebody said something because I did that last summer. All right. And we'll have to make sure we tell Mr. McCardle that too. All right, so hopefully now when you put yours up as authors, yours looks like this now. Now you might have to make yours bigger. Yours might be, you know, if I make it 100%, it's like this size, but it should look like this now. And if it doesn't, just make sure you put it, you know, that you added the extension. Now, when we look right here at what we have, we now have 3 routes. And again, it cascades. So it's looking for a match. So if we don't put in anything, it'll match this one. If we put in authors, it'll match this one. And if we put in author with an ID, it'll match this one. Did anybody try this? You don't have to. But did anybody try this? Let me go back here again, just like we just did. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see everything. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say author again, just like we did. So I'm going to say author/4. You probably did something like that, but did you try this? 44. That means that there's nothing that matches our input. Does that make sense? Now, there's stuff we could check for in here. What do I mean? Well, what if somebody puts in this? That's not terrible, right? But we could have literally checked and seen if it returned is NaN. Remember that? So if they put in something non-numeric, we just would have refused it. If they put in something that was less than 0, we could have refused it. We could even set it up, and we're not going to get into that right now, but if you look in MySQL has a bunch of built-in variables. For instance, every time you insert an ID, it's got a variable called insert ID, and it's got the last one you inserted. So we could go in and check that if it was within a certain range. Now, what happens here if we have author 7, and now author 7 has had a falling out with a company, so we remove them from the database. You put in 7, you're going to get this. Does all that make sense? All right.
When you say we can refuse it, does that mean like you put in an error message as like we did before?
That's up to you.
Okay.
All right. In fact, that's a great lead-in because, again, I don't think this is acceptable right here. All right. Now, if we put this in, there is and we put in 44, we put in whatever, there's a problem. We don't know if it's on our end and we put something wrong in, or if it's on the server's end and they screwed up. We don't know. All right. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to both of these and I'm going to change this. if error, throw error on both of them. All right. So we could leave that in there. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's kind of incomplete. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to come in, and if there's an error, I'm going to say res dot, and there's different ways we can do this. All right. I'm going to show you both ways. Now, don't type in this one. There is a send, not a send, a send status. So we could do that and put in like 500, which means there's a server error. We can do that, not a problem. Totally okay to do that. But the way I'm going to do it is like this. I'm going to put in res.status, and I'm going to put 500.json because I want to be able to put my own error in there. So I'm going to put in here, and we could call it anything we wanted to, but I'm going to call it error message. And I want it to say problem fetching author with, well, what ID? With ID. I might be able to use template strings in here. I don't know. So I might be able to do that, but I'm not. Well, let's try it. It's not going to hurt anything. So I'll try putting this in with template strings. ID, and then I'm not sure if it'll take this or not, is what I'm telling you. User ID, user ID, and in that, and I'm going to word wrap this right now. All right, so what I'm telling it to do here, something screwed up, we'll fix it in just a second, is if there's an error, I'm telling it to send a 500, which is something like a internal server command or internal server error, and I'm telling it to have this message, problem fetching data with ID, with that particular ID. So let's see. It does not seem to like two of these. See that? So let's see. It does need a parenthesis right there. That could be it. Is that it? Parser is expecting to find another one of these here. Ah, okay, I got it. That should be it. Now, let me grab this. Hold on a second. Even if you're typing, just stop for a second. Let me put this in a different editor.
You have another.
That's okay. We're going to get it fixed. It's fine. All right. But I want to, you're right. Now, before you do anything, just look at it. Okay. The res.json, this right here, that. Okay. That ends right here. So this is what's inside of it. So I could literally put this on another line. It wouldn't hurt anything. Make it easier for you to read. This is all one big thing. What I'd like to do is come back with a message that says problem fetching author with ID 44. You see what I'm saying? That's why I tried using the template string. If for some reason it doesn't work, let's say we do this. I'm going to copy this right here. Let's say we try this and it doesn't work. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to try doing this. Rather than template strings, I'll try doing it like this, but I'll put plus the old-fashioned way of doing it, like this. See the difference? Template strings are the recommended way of doing it. But if it doesn't work, I'll try doing it the other way. So I'm going to grab this because now I think it's correct at least, and I'm going to paste that back into here. All right, and I'm going to save. Now, it should have restarted the server. It did. All right, and I'm going to come back to here, and I've got this So I'm going to come back in there with author. I'm not sure it did restart the server, to be honest with you. 3 works, that's good. All right, it gave me nothing, but let's check here. It didn't like that. All right, and what I did was correct. So let me clear this and try restarting the server. It's giving me both the gets, but it's not giving me that JSON back. Don't think I'm missing anything. Unless it needs a return, which is not impossible. Okay, it restarted it there. It's not giving me a message, and I'm not sure why. It did when I did it before. I'm not going to worry about it for right now. I will try to look into it to see what the problem is. What I want you to get across here is there is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with just saying throw error. But unless somebody is smart enough to go read the server log, all right, whatever, they're not going to maybe even know there was a problem or whatever, what the problem was. All right, so I'm not sure what the problem is right there. So I'm just, for now, because I mean, I wanted to get to a certain point today, and I'm just going to stop it with it right there. All right. All right. Now, when we did this, and I don't care if it's a single author or if it's all authors. In fact, let's go back and look at the one with all the authors in it. Okay. So let's go back in here. I'm going to make that authors. Would you agree, looking on the screen, now we're seeing every author's ID? And there's nothing wrong with that unless, what if that was personal information? You know, what if those were addresses that you didn't want people to see, or something else, maybe a salary, whatever it is. So what we're going to do, just so you can see this, and we could change both of them. We're going to leave the one for just a single author. We're going to have it print everything out. Okay, but the one that's here, we're going to change the one for all authors so that it does not show the ID. Everybody with me? You could change the other one if you wanted to. You don't have to. It's totally up to you. Okay? All right. Now, I still have all of this stuff that's in here. All right? So for right now, I'm going to take this line that says res.json, and I'm just going to comment it out. Okay? And I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to say const authors equal. Now, rows, I'm going to say rows.map. That's every row that's in here. That's the rows that, you know, that I'm getting back. All right? But I've got to refer to each individual row with a different name. So since it was called rows, I'll call this row. You don't have to do that, but it's kind of a standard. That's usually what people do. Again, not mandatory. All right. So we're going to come through here and we're going to say return first name. Oops. Try it again. First name. And that's rows dot first name, and then last name, and I'm not sure why it's giving me that error, but we'll look in just a second, and that's rows dot last name. All right, again, we'll see if we can figure out, because that shouldn't be giving me an error, but it is, so that's fine. And that's the reason it's giving me that error is because that those should be curly braces and not parentheses. So curly brace. And I'm just telling you, just so you know this, the doctor wasn't sure when I talked to him, but I think I'm going blind in my right eye. And that's why, as dark as it is in here, sometimes I misread stuff. I don't do it on purpose. I would never, ever do that to you. All right? But sometimes I read something and I think it says A, but it says B. All right? Now, I can uncomment this, but we don't want to do a res.join on rows anymore. Now we want authors. Do you see the difference? Rows by default returns everything. So it returns the ID for each record, followed by the first name for each record, followed by the last name for each record. What we're doing is we're going in there and we're telling it, hey, no, I only want you to return the first name, which is Ro's first name, and I want you to return the last name, which is Ro's last name. Again, we are leaving out of here, we are leaving out the ID. If we left this as, right there, if we left it the way it was, rows, it would still return the ID. That would kind of defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do here. All right?
So I think we're going to come up with an error there because we're calling it row on line 40. And on line 41, we're calling it rows.
And you are correct. These should both be row. Thank you. Would have found it, but you're right. All right, make sure those are both row. Because since we're referring to each row, that's each row here, here, and here. So rows is the collection of all 25 authors. Row is each individual author. Thank you. And we are iterating through using the map function. All right. So if I save this now and I come back to here and I refresh, notice what's gone.
ID.
That is correct. Now, it's up to you, but I like this better. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that whole if statement from here on down. In fact, not the if, the whole const thing down below it on down, and I'm going to copy it over to the other one. So this thing from my lines 40, 41, 42, 43, and 44, and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to replace this with those. Does what I did make sense? So now let's see. Now is the big reveal. So if I go back to this and I say author and I say 6, now I no longer get the ID for that author. Now, you could make a case and say you should leave the ID in there because you want to verify that the number you put in is the number you got back. You see what I'm saying? So it's a judgment call. Or if you're doing this for somebody, it's what they want. If somebody is paying for you to do something, if they're paying me good money to do this stuff, and they say, hey, I want this, and I think, man, that's stupid. I'm not going to say, man, that's stupid. I'm just going to do it for them. And I think I've even told you this in other classes, because I've had situations before where people have asked me to do stuff, and I'm like, this is great, because they're not going to want it later, so they're going to have to call me back in to fix it. So I know I'm going to make more money from them. And it used to be I tell them that right away, but then I did this once with a person, and I showed them why they were wrong, and they were like, I want you to do it that way anyway. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, they called me back and asked if I could change it to the way I said it should be to begin with. You know? And after a while, I just got to the point where, okay, I'll do what you asked me to do, even if I think it's stupid. You asked me to do it, so I'm going to do it. All right, so let's see.
So I think I figured out a little bit of what the error thing is. Like when you try setting it, like if it's an error, throw this. There's nothing that knows, like, doesn't know what's an error and what's not an error with that parameter.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got something missing. I've got another set of notes on this. I got to find them. I don't know what the problem with that is. All right. So let me ask you this question because we're going to take a break now. Have you had enough for today or do you want to go on? Does anybody that burnt out? Because what I'd like to do is I'd like us to add one more route today where we'll be able to add our own new author. It's not a ton of work. It really isn't. So we're going to have to add a new post route. It'll be the first time we're going to add a post route. So it is 2:06. Let's come back, please, at 2:20. We'll start back up again. All right?